my name is Rhian Manwani and today I am going to perform 5 oral presentations. My first speech is an after-dinner speech delivered at a sporting event which is cricket. There are 30 people in attendance, all aged between 25 and 60. May I have your attention, everyone? It gives me immense joy and honor as your captain to address each of you today as we have finally conquered the Indian Premier League. When the coach and I first selected you guys in this very auction hall, everybody seemed to believe that we had chosen a bunch of losers. They believed that we were going to be the first team to be eliminated in this competition. But here we are, the reigning champions of the Indian Premier League. Throughout the course of this journey, I have seen this team become a family. I remember in one of the early matches, we were batting in the second innings. All our main wickets were down. And it seemed only our youngest players, who hadn't even played a match before, were our only hope. And then, you guys did the impossible. You 5 cricketers began hitting 6s and 4s against some of the most experienced bowlers. And in that moment, I knew we had what it took to win this competition. The partnership that we saw between Ishan, who is the best wicketkeeper I could have ever asked for, and Kabir, who is the fastest bowler of this team, is one of the strongest partnerships. Their trust in one another was so pure that it ultimately took us to victory. We have faced a lot of issues. On several occasions, even the media described our team as a team with no brains. All these things just before the tournament really brought this team together. I really want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart. The ability to put all those adversities aside and come out and play this type of cricket in front of such passionate fans, it's just mind-blowing. Whoa! First of all, I want to thank the Almighty, because without Him, nothing is possible. Second, I want to express my immense gratitude towards our team owners and sponsors, PepsiCo India, for believing in us and giving us the opportunity to compete in this amazing competition. I would also like to thank the board of the Indian Premier League to provide us with such a wonderful platform to compete against the best cricketers in the world. And last but not the least, I would like to thank our coaching staff. Our manager, Mr. Roy, was there with us throughout this journey and ensured that we got the best tools for practice. A big share of our victory also goes to our analyst, Miss Ananya Sharma, who studied our mistakes and has helped us to be the best versions of ourselves. And how could I forget the man behind all of this, our dear coach, Phil. Coach was going through a very difficult phase in his life before he came here to train us. Coach had his own way of training, but today I speak on behalf of everyone when I say that, sir, you have changed the life of each and every player in this team. We will always owe our career to you, sir. Today, we are going to celebrate this victory, but from tomorrow, we will keep improving, and at the next Indian Premier League, we will return stronger than ever. So let me conclude by saying, when people throw stones at you, you turn them into milestones. So here's to the best team of the Indian Premier League and to the best team in the entire world. Cheers! My second speech is a news feature told twice at two different news stations to an audience of listeners that are tuning in. Good morning, my fellow viewers. I am your host, David Allen, and you are listening to The Morning Show. On 29 September, the first presidential debate of 2020 was held to help the undecided voters choose a representative over the other. However, things did not go as planned. That was the worst debate America has ever witnessed. In fact, it wasn't even a debate, it was a disgrace. People that have been hurt most by that performance are the people who are genuinely looking to see what each candidate stands for and who they should vote for. There are people out there who haven't decided on either who to vote for or whether to vote entirely. And I am not sure if that performance is going to help them in the least. The reason why this debate failed to achieve its objective was partly because of the president. President Trump, who spent the entire time interrupting, not abiding by the rules he agreed to, lying and maliciously attacking the Vice President's son. And partly because of the moderator, Chris Wallace. The moderator did not have control over the debate stage for much of the evening. He did not remind the president that he was violating the rules of the debate until 1 hour and 13 minutes into the debate. Seeing this debate, most have concluded that that was a major disaster on all fronts. People who entered the debate thinking that two men in their 70s who want to lead the country for the next 4 years could have a reasonable exchange of ideas came out realizing that that is not possible. Many will talk about who won the debate and who lost it, but I can tell you one thing for sure, it's the Americans that lost this time. That concludes our short report on the first presidential debate. Don't go anywhere as we will be right back with more news from around the world. Hello and welcome to the Tonight Show with your favorite host, Eric Scott. We are now officially in the aftermath of the WrestleMania that took place in Cleveland on 29 September. The main event was Sleepy versus Sleazy, the first and hopefully the last debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. That was the worst debate I have ever seen. To be honest, I have never seen anything like that in my entire life. It seemed less like a presidential debate and more like a fight that you overhear in a booth at McDonald's. I mean, some of these insults were way more personal than you ever seen in a debate. I mean, Biden calling President Trump the worst president of America. Oh no! President Trump was no less either and responded by calling Biden's 47 years of service a complete waste. Also, I just want to say that whoever decided on this format needs to be fired. Because I don't know about you guys at home, but I have never, and I mean never, wanted to see a commercial break more badly in my life. I cannot do 90 straight minutes of that debate again. It was brutal. Now, the reason why this debate was such a colossal train wreck was because Donald J. Trump was throwing grenades on the tracks. And usually, in a debate like this, a moderator is present to prevent things from getting out of hand. But this time's moderator, Chris Wallace, was about as successful at stopping Trump as the popular vote. I mean, there was no way to stop Trump last night. He interrupted Biden, he interrupted Wallace, and there weren't any commercials. But if there were, he would have interrupted those two. So look, this was not a shining moment in American history books. Observers have even called it a dumpster fire or even the worst debate ever. And frankly, I don't know if anybody won that debate. All I know is for the next debate, I'm going to stand back from the TV and stand by a bottle of wine. Well, that's all for now, folks. I will see you guys tomorrow only on The Tonight Show. My third speech is a sermon told at a yoga retreat for the youth. There are 100 people present, all aged between 18 and 24. Tatrekagramaha manah kritva yatachit indriyakriyaha upavishyasane yunjad yogmatma vishuddhi. Seated on that seat, only by having single point concentration, having subdued the activities of mind, can one engage in yoga for purification of oneself. Namaste. I am Yogi Adityanath and I welcome you all to High Spirits, a yoga retreat for the youth. And I'd like to dedicate today's activities on a religious text taken from the Bhagavad Gita. Most people today face the issue of lack of concentration. It's in my humble opinion that people can't concentrate today for two reasons. One is we are never taught how to concentrate, and second is we never practice concentration. So how do we learn to concentrate? We start by understanding the mind. The mind is the most powerful tool in the world. It builds smartphones, it builds machines that drive itself on Mars. Yet, there is no manual for the mind. So back when I first became a monk, I started by learning how the mind works. Because once you know how the mind works, you can control it. Once you can control it, you can focus it. You can't concentrate or focus something that you don't understand. So how does the mind work? From a monk's perspective, there are two things that you need to understand. One is awareness and one is the mind. Now, imagine awareness as a glowing ball of light, like an orb that can float around. Now, imagine your mind as a vast area, a vast space filled with many different sections within it. One area of the mind can be anger, jealousy, hatred, love, and so on. And this glowing ball of light can travel within the mind and can go to any area it wants to go to. Once it goes to a particular area, it lights up that area. Once it lights up that area, you become aware of it. So let me tell you a story. Back at the monastery, when I first became a monk, a lady approached me and said, Guruji, whenever I see a film, I can never truly focus on one emotion. Is there something wrong with my ability to concentrate? Listening to this question, I said, no, not at all. But isn't this what you paid the director to do? Did you not just pay the director to take your awareness to different areas of the mind? You see, whenever your favorite character suffered, your awareness went to a sad area of the mind. Whenever the villain came up with the devious plan that you did not like, your awareness went to an angry area of the mind. And whenever there was a suspenseful ending to a movie, your awareness went to a curious area of the mind. So you see, it's not your awareness that is constantly shifting on its own. Somebody is doing that for you. And friends, if you see carefully, this happens on a daily basis. Each day we allow the things or people around us to take our awareness to different areas of the mind. When we allow this to happen, we get distracted. The art of concentration is keeping that glowing ball of light, that orb on what you're doing for an extended period. It drifts away, bring it back. The more you practice this, the better you can become at concentration. Give your work your undivided attention. Be unwavering in your focus. Proceed with confidence because life is meant to be lived joyously. And it all begins by learning how to concentrate and staying focused. Aham Brahmasmi. My next speech is a persuasive speech on a political issue. The event is a family support group where 8 to 10 families, all aged 14 and above, are in attendance. Death is not the opposite of life. It's a part of life. If people have the right to live, do they have the right to die? Is it okay to end someone's life in order to end pain and suffering? These are two of the biggest questions nowadays, and I am here to take my stand on this issue. People are easily confused with this because on one hand, our entire life has taught us that it is wrong to take a life. On the other hand, it is difficult to see our loved ones in pain and suffering. Good death, death for dignity, assisted suicide, mercy killing. These are the phases associated with euthanasia. Euthanasia is the practice of intentionally ending a life in order to end pain and suffering. Euthanasia is a Greek term meaning good death. It is a self-imposed death in a rather painless and merciful way. Imagine yourself being unable to walk, unable to see, you can barely breathe, let alone speak. Your life was well lived all those years before. You are now in such unbearable pain that you can't even cry. You can no longer complete simple tasks, and it only brings you intolerable suffering. Wouldn't you want the option to end all your pain and suffering while also putting your family out of this unbearable agony? These were some of the questions that the Supreme Court of Canada's highest court, was called upon in the year 2015 to answer in the death with dignity case of Gloria Taylor. And the court released its landmark decision, and now Canada has joined the growing list of nations that agree that if a person's suffering becomes so unbearable, they should have the right to die with the assistance of a doctor. However, even today, some religious groups and laws of different countries treat euthanasia as something immoral and illegal, which is not necessarily right. Often, a patient's life is much worse than death. There are countless diseases that modern medicine cannot cure. One of these diseases was the locked-in syndrome. People who have it cannot move a single muscle. One of such sufferers was Tony Nicholson. Tony Nicholson in 2010 and 2012 was denied the right to die by the British High Court. Unable to commit suicide and unable to ask anybody help him end his life, Tony starved himself to death to escape his misery. Was Tony's suffering justified? Why did Tony have to suffer so much when he could have died peacefully? The number of patients suffering from this and other diseases that have no other cure is uncountable. But they are doomed to live. Isn't it unfair that they are not allowed to end their pain and suffering? As I mentioned before, some religious groups already oppose euthanasia under any circumstances. And they are already lobbying for restrictive laws that opting for euthanasia would be effectively impossible. If you believe that we have the right to die by choice and personal dignity, there are two things that you can do. First, contact your provincial and federal lawmakers and let them know that you care deeply about this issue and expect any new legislation to honor the concept of euthanasia. Second, go public. Write a letter to the local newspaper or even initiate a conversation on social media. Just make your voice heard. Together, we can ensure that the critically ill patients receive the compassion, the protection, and the respect that they deserve. Something we all deserve. Thank you. My last speech is a story told at a team building workshop for a company's new interns. There are 50 interns present, all aged 15 and 17. Hello everybody! I am am Nathan Smith and I welcome you all to Apple's team building workshop. If you guys are expecting me to give you a boring lecture filled with some facts, let me tell you one thing. I have something different in mind. Today, I am going to tell you guys a story. And it's not just any story, it's the story of the hare and the tortoise. Now, I know some of you are going to be like, oh God, Nathan, why in the world are you telling us this story? But bear with me, because this time the story has a twist. So, let's begin, shall we? A long time ago, there was a hare and a tortoise that argued about who the faster runner was. They finally decided to take on one another in a race. We all know what happens next. The hare sprints ahead briskly, but soon realizes that it would take time for the tortoise to catch up with him. So he decides to seek shelter from the sun, but soon falls asleep. The tortoise, crawling at a steady pace, eventually overtakes him and wins the race. Moral of the story, slow and steady wins the race. But hold on, the story hasn't ended here. The hare was rather disappointed and realized that he had lost the race only because he was overconfident, careless and relaxed. So he challenged the tortoise to another race. The tortoise agreed. This time the hare ran with all his might without stopping from start to finish and won that race by several miles. Moral of the story, the fast and consistent will always beat the slow and steady. This time it was the tortoise that realized that if the hare did not stop, there is no way he would beat him. He thought hard and then came up with a different course and challenged the hare to another rematch. The hare, of course, agreed. Having learned his lesson, the hare did not stop once the race began until the course led him to the bank of a river. He was taken back by surprise as he did not know what to do. There were no bridges in sight and nobody to ask for directions. As he was cracking his head, thinking of different ways to cross the river, the tortoise strolled along slowly, dived into the river, swam across it, and won that race. Moral of the story, always identify your core competency and then change the playing field according to your core competency. But hold on, the story hasn't ended just yet. With the hare and the tortoise spending so much time together racing one another, they had become rather good friends. So they decided to race one last time, but this time as a team. As the race began, the hare carried the tortoise and sped to the riverbank. There, they switched positions and the tortoise ferried the hare to the opposite bank. There, they again switched positions and completed that race together. They completed that race in a record time that none of them would have been able to achieve if they were to do it alone. Moral of the story, it's all about situational leadership. Always identify your core competency and then change the playing field according to your core competency. The one who has the core competency being worked on leads the team to finish the task. Moral of the entire story is that it is good to be individually brilliant and to have strong core competency. But unless you are willing to work as a team and harness each other's core competency, you will always perform below par. Because there will always be situations where you do poorly while somebody else does well. I really hope all of you like this story. And now we have a team-based activity that would require all of you to work in teams. May the best team win. Let's race! I will now move on to my reflection task, the first part being how I built my performance program. For me, the starting point was deciding on which speeches I wanted to perform. Out of the 7 options that were available, I had to choose 5 speeches that not only suited my strengths, but in some way posed a challenge. I knew if the challenge was missing, I would work days, I would work months, but I wouldn't be able to make any progress. So yes, selecting the speeches was definitely the starting point for me. Some of the very old situations I have seen have acted as external influences. For the story, I myself had been to a team building workshop arranged in my college. And as the program began, I was thinking to myself that why would they tell us such a story? And I thought I would just leave throughout the program. But as I heard the story, I gradually began to take interest. And once the program was over, I was just admiring the fact that they could use such a simple children's story to impart such a message to teenagers like me. So I knew that if I was going to narrate a story, it had to be the story of the hare and the tortoise. For the sermon, I, as a college student, was not the idealistic student. I would often lose my concentration, and I would have this phase where I would just want to see some videos on the net or play some video games and not do my work, no matter how many assignments I had pending. But I had a trick to get out of it. It was to watch sermons on the net. And as the sermons would begin, I would try to focus, and once the sermons would be over, I would feel motivated and would want to work harder than before. So I knew that if a sermon was told correctly, it could do wonders for the listeners. So I just wanted to perform a sermon. And finally came the persuasive speech, and I chose the topic of euthanasia. Euthanasia is a topic which is very close to my heart. Because a very dear friend of mine, his grandfather was diagnosed with a terminally ill disease, and his medications were making him suffer every day, every hour. And I would see him suffer so much, and I would just believe that why don't they let him go, as he himself asked for to stop his medications to end his pain. And I would look at his family and my friend, and I would see guilt in their eyes. And this entire situation that I could see from a third person's view, I realized that euthanasia is a very sensitive issue that everybody needs to be educated about. So I decided that if I was ever given a platform, I would speak on euthanasia, and hence I performed euthanasia today. Moving on, once I had all the speeches that I wanted to perform in mind, I moved on to plan an event. Planning an event was very important so that the speeches remained powerful. And I saw hundreds of after-dinner celebrations for the after-dinner speech and saw many different events in which the team won or the team had an easy win. And I chose this situation because I felt that this would give my speech more impact. So I did this process for every speech, and I finally had the perfect events for each speech. Then I had to place a balanced yet varied audience. Having the balance yet variety in the audience was very important because the events were completely different, and a correct audience had to be chosen. And if a wrong audience was to be chosen, then the impact of the speeches would be essentially nullified. For example, when I was watching those sermons as a college student who lost his concentration, I could relate to what was being said, while my 10-year-old sister, who just sat next to me, saw an old man speak. And so I knew that the audience had to be correct. So choosing the audience had two basic requirements. The audience had to find the speech appealing and had to connect to the speech on some level. Then, once all of this extensive pre-planning was done, came the difficult part, which was drafting and researching. Researching was very important because I wanted to keep the speeches factually correct. But some speeches like the story and the after dinner did not require any researching. News feature, the persuasive, the sermon required some intense amount of researching. For the news feature, I drafted the speech, and drafting the speech was a cakewalk. But little did I know that my tone when I first performed them was nowhere close to that of a real RJ. So I had to again listen to many different radio talk shows and then practice and imitate how an RJ spoke. And for the sermon, although I had the topic in mind, I had to find a religious text that supported my topic. So again, I went through these different holy books and finally found the perfect text in the Bhagavad Gita. And then again, I knew which topic I wanted to perform for the persuasive. I needed some facts and incidents to keep my speech factually correct yet persuasive. So that required another round of researching. Moving on to personal personal responses and challenges. Once all of these speeches were drafted, I performed them. And the first time I performed, my sister came up to me and said, "Your speeches are very boring." And I'm thinking to myself, why would even she say something like that? I have spent hours working on the perfect speech, drafting, then choosing the perfect audience, creating the perfect event. And she's just coming up to me and saying, "Your speeches are monotonous." And soon I did find that it was the issue of voice modulation. And that was my biggest challenge. Voice modulation, the lack of voice modulation had actually cancelled out all the effort that I had put in up till that moment. And soon I did find the skills needed to approach this challenge. The solution was very simple. It was understanding the speeches and then performing. Understanding the speeches was very, very crucial because once I understood the speeches, I knew where the pitch was to be changed, where I had to go slow, where the volume had to be adjusted. I knew where I had to emphasize and where I had to pause. So after realizing all of this, I had to practice this to implement this into my speeches. And after a lot of practice, I could perform the speeches just the way I imagined them while I was drafting the speeches. For staging, I tried to keep my props to a bare minimum. Since I wanted to keep my speeches the star of the event, I chose the minimum amount of props that I required. While some of the speeches just needed a PowerPoint presentation, some needed a glass, a lectern, or a bathroom. And these are very simple tools, but again, using these simple tools efficiently required a lot of practice. Moving on, what I have discovered through this journey is that any obstacle that we face in anything, it can be overcome by determination, and if you have a will, there is a way. And if I have to approach a similar challenge in future, I know just what needs to be done to rise to the occasion. At first, I have to calmly accept that yes, I do have a flaw, which is a problem for many. But once I have accepted that my flaw and identified it, I have to calmly analyze and look for solutions. And if I'm not able to find a solution myself, I always have my teachers, my parents, my friends, my peers to look for help. So this was what I have discovered and I would do for a similar challenge. Throughout working through this journey, I have discovered that one of my strengths is analyzing a problem. Analyzing a problem is a very important skill needed for anyone in their life. And I have discovered this through this journey because I was able to analyze my problem and find solutions. And I'm grateful to the ATCL to help me find this strength of mine. Finally, coming on to health and safety, safe stage practices are a must to create the best experience possible for the audience. And it involves using the props correctly, smoothly transitioning from one performance to another. And yes, I was very clumsy when I first began. And soon, with a lot of practice, I was able to use these tools and transition from one speech to another perfectly. Finally, since we are in the midst of a pandemic, a lockdown was posed, and expecting to work with an audience was a very far-off dream. I wanted to work with an audience because working with an audience, we can record their reactions and improve on our own performance. But we were at home doing online classes, and it was just in the last few months where we could come to class and practice with the projector. Finally, physical and vocal health are a must. With all of this practice, day after day, we were practicing, my vocal and physical health had taken a huge hit. Apart from just tiring myself out, I would often strain my throat. And whenever this would happen, I would start gargling with warm water. And I started drinking warm water in the mornings and even taking steam. And I have actually picked up a few healthy exercises that have helped me remain healthy during this entire journey. One of them is humming. When you hum, the vibrations that are produced that actually loosen your vocal cords. Another is chanting. Chanting also has a similar effect, but it also acts as a stress reliever. And I always chant when I am nervous, and it really helps me. Finally coming on to sustaining focus and energy. As I am primarily an actor and not a public speaker, I had to create 5 different characters who were performing 5 different speeches at 5 different events to 5 different audiences. So this required immense amount of focus and energy, as I had to transition from one character to another in just a matter of few seconds. So after keeping all of these minute details into mind and working with full determination, have I been able to perform these speeches to the best of my abilities. Thank you.